So I know many people would look at my videos and they would think, yesterday you're talking about the end of the millennial, that the millennial kingdom already happened. Today you're talking about Gen X. What is up? You're, all over the place. No, it's all tied to the same thing, actually. Because the start of my day was, God was saying Gen X over and over again. So I knew there was some connection to something. Well, Gen X, for over 2 decades, Gen X has been the most faithful to God than any other generation. Consistent. They stayed faithful to God. Yet they're the latchkey generation. They came from a ton of trauma. And I hate to even bring that up. I mean, every latchkey kid knows you had a traumatic childhood, but you don't blame your parents because they were stressing too. They were stressing working 2 jobs, and then we were always getting in trouble because of raising ourselves. But as I looked into this, because they're actually, sociologists are trying to unravel how it is that of all generations, Gen X is the most authentic, and they consider Gen X the last authentic generation. That's how it will be now too with social media. They're just, I mean, you already see it. The influence on both the factions. The factions is what the founders saw as they would destroy the country, because they imprint on you their ideas instead of letting you just be they don't let God mold you. People would say the right would say we have to do something because of LGBT. Yeah, and so they create Turning Point, and then they go on to be predators too. They just think they're doing it for the right reasons. So again, Gen X sees through both sides of that bullshit. And so you may think that makes us smarter. No, it doesn't make sense why we would see through it. If anything, you would think because we were latchkey kids, because we were, we had some traumatic upbringings, that we would get pulled into that. But that's what's amazing, is God protected us. That's what it is. If Gen X, I should say, thinks back, okay, now if you're somebody that you were in some wealthy family and went to the 4-year university, you likely came out a liberal. That's different, okay? I'm not saying no Gen Xers are. I'm just saying that if you're on the far left craziness stuff, then, but there's not a lot of Gen Xers that are, because of the fact they didn't go to the 4-year universities. They just went to community college. So not hardly any, they're the smallest generation to go to a 4-year university. So no influence there. Yet when we were young, we somehow were able to see how somebody was always trying to influence us. The market, and it says Gen X was heavily marketed with commercials, whether it was for toys or cartoon, everywhere they were marketed to. How did we manage to we weren't just, brilliant. No, God was, it makes sense. God, it's just, I don't think people consider it, because I had to sit back and think about it. That God, he looks out for the most broken. Gen X is really probably the most broken generation. We just don't talk about it. We hear about everybody else's pain in their generations when we look at it like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like we go off about it because it's such bullshit, okay? You got the, Gen Zers blaming baby boomers as if that makes you look good at all, because someday God will humble you for that when they're elderly, okay? But every generation, it's just me, 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 me. So see, Gen X, we knew nothing was about us, even to this day. We're used to that. And so then to many younger people, there's this image that we just don't give a shit about anything. That's not true. We do give a shit. It's just we know that nothing is authentic. It's rare. Authenticity is rare. So nothing will get us to be engaged with anything because we see it for what it is, bullshit. That's why we came out hard for Trump. We did, because we saw that he was authentic. We did not care about people say he wasn't politically correct. That's why we voted for him. Yeah, we don't have time for that. Like all this safe space stuff on the one side, and then the crazy lunatics with Turning Point. It's all factions that. So that's the reason they don't like Gen X. But how is it that we had all this faith? Well, I started thinking, and I think maybe Gen X, if you think about it, you might realize this too, is that when you're home alone all the time and I don't ever remember being scared at 11, 12, 13, always, I mean, we're talking from morning all the way into the wee hours, because my dad would work one job and then he bartended until 2 a.m. or whatever. So I hardly saw him on some days. And then, but I don't ever remember being afraid. I mean, if I was watching a scary movie, but never just being afraid at being home alone. I don't ever have that feeling of I can't be alone. Like I've taken care of psych patients that have that, like they have that, I don't know, separation anxiety or something. We don't have that. I don't know any Gen Xer that does. So it's just weird. How is it that that generation of all bypassed all the controls of influence? It was God. And it makes sense because God always, even though we don't realize it, he protects the most broken. I would say Gen X is probably the most broken generation. They just don't talk about it. We get over it. We find peace with it. We're not running around blaming everybody. It's like, but I think if you think back, because I had to think, I'm like, no, I did talk to God. I just wasn't a religious thing. When I prayed, it was just talking to God. The same thing I went on to do once I got sober. I just forgot that I would do it sometimes. So I bet if Gen X thinks about that, they probably might realize that there were times. Because did you ever feel alone? I never felt alone. How is that at that young age? I don't know. It's like you knew there was something looking out for you. Not that you wouldn't get in trouble, because you got in a whole bunch of trouble. But you knew something was looking out for you in many ways. Well, God was, because God knew there wasn't anybody around. So even though you got in a lot of trouble, I mean, the benefit that came with that for Gen X is God protected you from all the bullshit artists. Not that you didn't run into some, if you personal level, but you know what I mean. No, none of the political pitfalls. Because again, there's only a small percentage of Gen X that went to the 4-year universities. That too bypassed Gen X being influenced. So that's the reason we're the forgotten generation. If you're not a generation that can be influenced, then they want to forget about you, especially when you don't have the most numbers. But they've tried over and over to get Gen X. They can't. And I think it's not because we're so brilliant. It's because, well, where there's a trauma like that, where there's nobody raising the kids, okay? And they're trying to raise themselves. I think that God helps us out a little bit more than we realize, and maybe think back on that. Because there's too many unique things here with Gen X, and really, it doesn't make any sense. They have been the most faithful to God for over 2 decades. They can't be influenced by either side, but they recognize authenticity. It's God that did all that. He was shaping that for us. And it makes sense. It makes sense. Because, while they put up, whatever the left's going to put up, and then they put this Nick Shirley up, okay? Everybody's like, oh, he's such a wonderful man. Yeah, okay, whatever. He has no wisdom. But why would God, what is God, here's the thing. When has God ever raised up, the perfect? He doesn't. He becomes most close to the broken. So while the world puts the Nick Shirley on the right up, or, the perfect Charlie Kirk, please, or the left puts whoever their perfect image of whatever faction they're putting up, who we were influenced by even if you didn't realize it, was God. Best influence to have.